And the concept today is about Buddhist concept of freedom. Let me introduce my main Dharma teacher, Khenpo Sodargye. He is one of the spiritual leaders in Lima lineage. As the Tibetan High Lama of Lima lineage, he endorses Rhine spirit and offers teaching from a wide variety of Buddhist lineage to hundreds of thousands of worldwide students. He is a virtual guru and a Doton lineage holder. He is empowered to transmit Vajrayana teachings and practices. He is also a Buddhist scholar and teacher, a prolific translator into Chinese, and a modern Buddhist thinker renowned across Asia and West for his interest in the integration of traditional Buddhist teachings with worldwide issues and modern life. And the sharing tonight is from one of his public speeches. Now, everybody believes freedom is very important. However, the understanding of what defines freedom actually vary tremendously. Some people enjoy physical freedom and going where they want, but they're mentally challenged. For example, and they're dominated by their intense anger or hatred and excessive desires, or they're craving, for something on the extreme level, right? This makes them unhappy and, and mentally imprisoned, right? And some actually are haunted by their rage and jealousy, and they constantly feel not happy or even, not free for a second, right? And others, although they are, physically challenged, like this, the greatest scientist here, right? Everybody know him, but they have, they have profound, thoughts. Actually, they could, they could have their mental to dive into the universe and to searching for the ultimate, truth about the universe. And so they are, yes, they are physically challenged, but they're mentally free, right? Okay, and actually, due to our different value systems, for some people, it is meaningless to live in the world without freedom. Like John Patrick Henry, one of the founding fathers of the United States, he used to say, "Give me liberty or give me death," right? So, but sometimes, and freedom is much more than Americans thought, like do whatever I please version, okay? And which meaning that in this country, the value system mainly refers to one's ability to act according to one's own desire and do whatever they want and see whatever they feels inclined to and think about whatever come to mind. But that's the ultimate freedom. This is a very, important question, come to our mind. And from the Buddhism view, the ultimate freedom is to liberate ourselves from samsara. That we no longer to experience the pain and emotional disturbance caused by life's difficulties, challenges, and stressors. And sometimes, if we ask ourselves, who suffered, right? The common answer will be I or my heart. Isn't that right? And clinging to that, or being obsessed with the delusional self or mind, actually become the major cause of suffering. And as long as suffering not stop, we really cannot, be free. And Buddhists through the different level, of practice, and it helps us to realize that the mind nature is empty. And once we find that mind nature is not existent, right, we are free from the emotion thoughts. And at the same time, and Buddhists have adopted a distinctive approach to the concept of self. And Buddhism holds that personal identity is delusional. And each of those, a self does not actually exist. Okay, and for example, and this actually, the practice itself. Okay, and and a lot of the times, Buddha taught that all the phenomena, right, are conditional and impermanent. Okay, and we always ask ourselves, what are we, right? And the answer could be like we are made of the condition and impermanent groups of things. And so that's called like five aggregates, right? And our cell, our body, right, the head, and all the parts, and physically, and also our mind, right? Okay, so but if we look into those aggregates, and we will find out there's no permanent and independent self that occupy the aggregates, right? So which meaning that those aggregates, for example, like our cell, okay, and we know that from the very little me to nowadays the middle-aged me, and nobody would admit that we are the same person, right? And why is that? Because physically the cell actually just to go, become the new cell every 7 days. So physically, we have the new body every days, right? So physically, we are made of different aggregates, all right? And then also mentally that, and no matter what really occupy our mind, it's come and go and do not exist forever. Isn't that true? So our value system, right? Our understanding of the universe, or like the society, actually change constantly. So nothing dominate. Okay, they, it dominate self forever. All right. Okay. So once we have this realization, and we literally to understand that the previous understanding without the practice is that normal human being, right? And we do have a very strong belief in self, which meaning that I do exist right now, right? And the thing is that we we have hard, or difficulty to find out that the the so-called existence, which meaning that the self is not permanent. It's constantly changing and at every second, at very fast, super fast pace. And actually, it arises and falls due to the causes conditions. Okay, and we actually cling and crave to things, especially the five aggregates which reinforces dilution and dukkha. All right, because we want self-protection, right? And we truly want to, satisfy ourselves. So in the West, for example, right, and without the, strong religion, and people, sometimes, we when we develop a permanent or strong perception of self, we gradually produce, egoism. And Western psychologists recognize egoism as one of the basic motivation of the human mind, and it is desire for pleasure and aversion to pain. So in Buddhism, as long as we have the self, we become, egoistic. And why do egoism and application of the, like, hedonic principle cause pain? And because like in Buddhism, we realize that suffering is caused by desire, right? Clinging to the self is mainly an attempt to fulfill desire. And when we crave something pleasant, we tend to reject its opposite, and they made us attached to things being one way rather than another, and causing us to suffer if the desire is frustrated, and suffering leads to mental imprisonment. Okay, so through the Buddhism practice, It's train our heart, train our mind to have the realization that actually there's no self being existent, no self being permanent. Okay. And actually, what we realize is that, the self is constantly changing. All right. So we call it a dukkha. All right. And however, and humans gratitude towards, absolute and want to believe things are permanent and there is a, independent, self being existent. Okay. And this belief in a permanent and unchanging self leads to dukkha. Okay. And which is the cause of the suffering. So the Buddhist, practice and the purpose of the practice is letting go of the belief in a permanent, unchanging, and independent self. And when the belief in self is gone, we are totally and mentally or physically free from the unwholesome actions, right? And we are able to see all the phenomena as they truly are, which meaning that, and we realize the ultimate truth about the universe. All right. And the anatta, all right, is extensively discussed in the Vajrayana tradition. Okay. And this term actually refers to no unchanging, no permanent self or essence can be found in any phenomenon. All right. And so this, this term is highly, focused and through the practice of, and if we finally through the practice and have the realization that there's no self and there's no who is born, who is dies, who meditates, who suffer, and eventually will be free of fear. Let's talk about another very fundamental component of freedom in Buddhism. And actually, this is what we call is autonomy. All right, autonomy is, basically common called self-discipline, right, and self-governance. And actually, it's best actualized through the realization, the nature of mind, and when we have a sense of self, discipline, we may seem to be restricted in our behavior, but there is a big picture, and it's very important to consider here. Okay, and in Buddhism, the five precepts are the fundamental, or foundation of the Buddhist self-discipline, and practicing these precepts is a very good medicine that can protect us and our families and safeguard our happiness. And it's simply, five principles: do not kill, do not steal, do not commit sexual misconduct, do not use harmful speech, do not partake in toxicant. Okay, when we talk about freedom, one way to think about it is whether, we have ability to enjoy peace. I know that lacking of mindfulness, lacking of the self-governance and governance can lead to a lot of suffering in our daily life. And many families have been broken because of the sexual misconduct, alcoholism, drug addiction, and their children and grandchildren continue to suffer, and to transmit suffering to next generation. The seeds of suffering that they have will be transmitted, okay, from this generation to the next generation because of the lack of the self governance. All right. Actually, the idea of self-discipline is very common to most, religion. Like, in Buddhism, it's called discipline, right? And as one process on the Buddhist path, the number of precepts or rules we follow increases as well, right? And in religion like Islam, they also have their own precepts for governing people's behavior, and this seems like very common. All right, and the purpose of the precepts is to enhance our spirit. And also, in Buddhism, the the practice is mainly focused on observing our mind. Why is that? Because try to think that the thoughts, the moods, and emotions that appear there, right? And the mind is source of the happiness and suffering. And with even a little realization of our mind, our life will be changed, you know, uh, greatly, right? And in Buddhist text, the reflection of the moon on a lake is used as a metaphor to explain how things do not exist in the way that appear to us, right? The reflection of the lake moon seems to be fully real, but substantially and existent, and to but they're not, in fact exist in that way, right? And this uh, analog can help us to begin understand the way, how mind exists. The mind is not composed of the physical elements of earth, water, fire, or wind. But if the mind is not tangibly real, how is it that we are able to think and feel and do all the things that we do each day? Uh, and the essence of the mind is empty. We cannot see the mind, we cannot touch the mind. But to say that the mind is empty does not mean that the mind is vicious like space. It is not empty like a void or like in a vacant room. It is also not devoid of characteristics. Your mind is being aware, right? And it has the quality of knowing. The nature of the mind is luminosity, which allow for the drawing of appearance. And these appearance can come in a variety of forms. And certain forms are consistent with experience of samsara, and certain forms are consistent with the experience of nirvana. And everything that we could experience in samsara or nirvana is a creation of the mind. And all appearances of mind are spontaneous. In this way, the mind is also described as spontaneous. And and also we as a Buddhist, we always ask, how can we find our mind, and where can we find our mind, right? And where does the mind rise, and whether we check inside or outside of body, and we cannot find it. When the conceptual source arises, does it exist in our mind, like heart, like head, in our heart, in our mouth, right? And we just cannot find it. And when it ceases, does it fly to the sky or disappear within the body? By examining where it comes from, remain and goes, and we realize that the mind is so intrinsic existence. And as the Diamond Sutra says, past thoughts are intangible, present thoughts are intangible, and the future thoughts are intangible. Okay, and if we look up at the sky is empty. And likewise, when we discern our mind, although many kinds of thoughts arise, they are empty. For instance, when we feel angry, our mind at that instance is empty, like the sky, not impeded by anything, and stabilize our mind, discern it, we will know, right? The moment we realize it and we won't be trapped by the emotion, and actually there follows the freedom. And actually, to realize our mind is empty will help us to free from emotion attachment. When we look into the mind, we know it is restless without ever pausing for a moment, like a naughty boy, uh, and it could generate countless positive and negative emotions, and they come and go constantly. And just like a rainbow, right? When sun, water vapor, proper temperature come together, and a rainbow appears. But nobody will consider rainbow will stay forever, right? And if one or all of the elements disappear, and rainbow disappear, just like thoughts or emotions. Okay, and if we look at when people crazily in love, and their mind will create wave of emotion and which eventually fooled them to generate love attachment. But if they are able to take a closer look, they will realize that emotion, just like thoughts, arise, stay, disappear in super fast pace. So in Buddhism, we have a special term, instant birth and death. So when we do not have the meditation power to identify that emotion is constantly birth and death, the emotion creation invisible iron chains. And the moment once we realize that the living emotion is not permanent, we will free from the attachment. Also, from the Buddhism view, right, and be mindful through the meditation and introspection is very, very important practice for us. Okay, and mm, this practice will lead us to understand the truth of the world as taught in Buddhism, and that everything the world exists as an illusion, just like a dream. And why it is very important for us to understand that all the phenomenon happening in this world is that is just nothing but a dream. Because just to think about that, when people trapped in a dream, right, which meaning that they are not aware that they are having a dream, and they treat everything surrounding their life so true, which means that if in the dream this guy is chasing by a monster and he feel like he's physically and he's not able to move because he's so scared, and mentally like in a prison because he feel the fear, right? But once he wake up from the dream and he realized that the monster chasing after him do not exist, it's a fake phenomenon. It will disappear at some time and immediately he's free from the fear, right? So that's very key. That's a very key and fundamental practice, right? And for us to stop the suffering. And so that's very important practice that we should be aware. All right. Okay. And whatever we encounter in life, all right, and more we grasp, and actually the more suffering we create for ourselves. And this will further mess things up. Instead, see it as a illusionary, as a dream, just like said by Buddha, like a dream and magical illusion, bubble, phantom, drop, lightning, and all compounded phenomenon be like this. And just by reciting this verse often in daily life, it will help us not to be attached, onto too much things that happen in our daily life. And it will, help us to stop the course of the suffering and reach a free status of our mind. So thank you again very much for listening to my sharing, and we will see you next week. Thank you.